For anyone unaware of Welsh culture, located somewhere between Derek the Weather and taking a sheep up to your hotel room, is a weird national treasure called Max Boyce. Max Boyce is basically the entire nation of Wales' embarrassing uncle. A comedian folk musician who made a career out of singing songs about the shade of red Wales playing and Barry John. One of Boyce's biggest hits was a song called The Outside Half Factory. It's a song about a factory where they make outside halves. And it's not a one-off. The fly-half shirt in Wales carries more mystique than a lorry full of cloned X-Men. It probably brings more national pressure and debate than any other jersey in world rugby. The reigning fly-half is an ever-changing yet ever-present figurehead. It is to Wales what the monarch is to England or the president's mistress is to France. The image of the Welsh 10, the dream the public wants, is a borderline wizard who plays beautiful, free-flowing rugby, able to flick 80-yard passes without winding up his wrists, and backheel conversions and cause every rugby player in England to fall over just by wiggling his hips, even if they're not on the pitch, even if they're just in Tesco. However, over the last 20 odd years, the outside half factory started to diversify to produce new flavours. 10 who are great kickers, 10 who are great tacklers, 10 who are just a bit shit. Wales has had to catch up with the modern idea of a fly half as the guy who masterminds the whole mission rather than just provides the dynamite. Over the last few years, Wales' incumbent 10 has been a guy who looks to do exactly that. Dan Biggar is very open about having based his game on Johnny Wilkinson, perhaps the most infamously anti-Welsh 10 of all time. A guy known for superbly managing the game and booting the leather off it so often they started to make the balls out of rubber. Biggar's biggest attribute is his incredible temperament, perhaps best showcased when he dragged kicking and screaming an injury-ravaged Wales team featuring a scrum half on the wing, a winger at 12, an insect at fullback and a horse on the wing, past the host nation out of the toughest group in World Cup history. However, like Wilkinson at the tail end of his career, Biggar is a far more versatile 10 than his reputation suggests. The problem is, Wales' game plan, built around defence and fitness, for a very long time has prevented Biggar doing all he can. It's a bit like a 1950s husband keeping his trophy wife in the kitchen despite the fact she's actually got a pretty strong running and passing game. But now that his neglectful husband is looking to play more expansively, a great deal of pressure was heaped on Biggar to show that he could do this against Ireland, and a great deal of criticism came in turn. However, I don't think Biggar did much wrong. During his 62 minutes on the field, Wales retained just 24 phases of possession. Usually in a test match, a team would be looking at an average of 60 to 80 phases in that time. I haven't seen anyone go through so few phases since I was a teenager. He had virtually no chance to create anything. Biggar touched the ball just 17 times, only once inside the opposition 22, and by my count, 15 out of 17 of these were positive. Biggar passed the ball 9 times, 8 of these resulted in gain line successes or line breaks from finding space out wide. Biggar kicked the ball 5 times. Now, Wales spent 73% of his time on the field in their own half. So the fact he thought a few times, nah lads, you know what? I fancy being over there is fair enough. And following all 3 of the kicks he made outside of his own 5 metre line, Wales regained the ball inside 40 seconds with a net gain in territory. It's a bit like Biggar was the last person up to the buffet and people are berating him for the fact he didn't get any cocktail sausages, despite the amount of nutrition he managed to get onto that little corrugated cardboard plate and then into his body. I don't think even Bowden Barrett could have done much more than a half-it Dan Biggar did that day. Frankly, he gets enough abuse at home from his husband. Although, admittedly, this metaphor does fall down when you realise there's no way Dan Biggar would ever take that level of shit from anyone, considering how short a shrift he gives all referees. Barry John retired from rugby because a lady curtsied to him, and he decided this was a sign that everything had gone too far. If a lady curtsied to Dan Biggar, he'd retroactively wonder why every woman he'd ever met hadn't been doing the same thing the entire time. Being this humble, though, doesn't make him any worse a player. I don't mind 10 being a bit chopsy. It's only a problem if, say, their moaning to the ref causes them to lose the ball, which directly results in the try for the opposition 11 phases later. If that happened, then we'd have a real strike against Biggar's name. But as it is, I think that... Bouncing off tackle! Oh, shit. Prior to Biggar's comeback, the curtains had matched the drapes, as the red 10 shirt was worn by professional sunburn victim and Prince Harry lookalike Rhys Priestland. More than the attacking fly half, the man they call Patch for reasons I can't quite fathom, had an outstanding game against Scotland. An awful lot of his success comes down to the time he gets on the ball, the way he likes to keep hold of it right up until the last possible second. He'll take the ball right up to the defensive line before deciding to flick a pass or make a kick or opting to attack the gap. He'll take in all the available information before making the decision. It's easy to just say, his attacking's really good, but with Patchell, it's all down to his fantastic sense of timing. What I'm about to say is absolutely pretentious bullshit, but it makes sense that he's, by all accounts, an incredibly talented musician, as he plays with the kind of creative precision you see from the best guitarists. He's incredibly talented and specialises at bringing the players around him into the game. He's actually kind of the opposite of the guy who comes to a party with his guitar, in that he makes everyone else feel like the centre of attention, no matter what time they got to the buffet. Now, whilst Patchell has been on fantastic form for the last 18 months, there have been 2 crucial games in which he's lost his head, which must be difficult when it's that fluorescent. One was for the Scarlets against Bath in October, a tight game in the pouring rain where the opposition put a huge amount of pressure on him, and the other was for Wales against England in February, a tight game in the pouring rain where the opposition put a huge amount of pressure on him. However, the way England and Bath press Patchell is what's important. All 10s are used to dealing with defenders trying to shoot him in their face, but England's variation was particularly effective. They didn't just shoot at full pelt in the way that Bath did in a return fixture, as that allows him to simply step and beat them, or look for the short pass or chip. Patchell is great when either jamming on instinct alone, or playing from his game plan sheet music. But the struggle comes from that brief spot somewhere in between. What England did is adapt their line speed to put on the kind of pressure that would get to Patchell in particular, preventing him from controlling things himself. They forced him to overthink his every option. He was having to look up at a defensive line that he couldn't predict, to watch them, to wait too long. When you thrive off making a decision as late as possible, off taking in all the information you can, it becomes tricky when the information is changing constantly. You can't work out which one to make until after you've had to make it. That made it even more difficult to execute anything with accuracy. Patchell might have been able to play the banjo, but he seemingly couldn't have hit a cow's arse with one that day. However, Patchell will have learned from a match like that, and hopefully the next time he plays a tight game in the pouring rain where the opposition puts a huge amount of pressure on him, he can still perform like the ginger prince he is. The final man to have stood roughly 5 metres away from the Welsh scrum this season has been an import from the outside half factory's Kiwi branch in the form of Gareth Anscombe. After giving up on his dream playing for the All Blacks, Anscombe realised it would be so much easier to cash in on the fact that his mother was born in Cardiff and run away to play for Wales. Anscombe is a very rare thing in modern rugby, a running 10. Whilst in theory he can kick and pass, Anscombe looks for holes like a Shia LaBeouf completist and loves nothing more than to charge at the opposition defence and just hope for the best. If you present the guy with the smallest gap, he'll go for it. This means he makes a pretty high number of line breaks for a 10. As such, because he's the closest thing Wales has to a Welsh 10, there's been a huge spell of support to see him play 10 for Wales, even though I think his head looks like it's full of milk. Anscombe's style is great for his highlights compilation, but not always the best thing for his team. A few years ago, then Dragons coach Kingsley Jones talked about how he used Anscombe's chronic gap addiction tactically against him. If ever they were men short out wide, all he had to do was give Anscombe an inch and he'd ignore the yards outside him. You'll often see Anscombe charge at a gap, only for it to be shut off when he gets there, defenders jamming, closing Anscombe down before he can get the ball away. Yes, he may make breaks, but he kills overlaps. The crux of the Anscombe argument is that he had a magnificent second half against Wales, where he put in a performance so gloriously Welsh, you forget he says silly things like chocker and cuz. Gareth Anscombe was presented with a set of circumstances custom made for Gareth Anscombe, and if there's anyone you want at 10 in a situation perfect for Gareth Anscombe, it's Beauden Barrett. But in the lack of Barrett, Wales went with Anscombe. The game was naturally starting to open up, and the English defence was set to play against a thoughtful warlock, not a sparky, erratic imp. He caught them off guard, so they never looked to implement any traps for him, and he began to just walk around the ones they built for his gangly ginger counterpart instead. However, if we compare Anscombe's performance off the bench against Ireland, he touched the ball 14 times, the conditions of the game dictating that he didn't kick at all. Whereas Biggar didn't run into contact once. Literally the first touch Anscombe gets, he's headed for warm bodies quicker than a zombie prostitute. Because the defence immediately knows of the running threat he possesses, it allows him to draw defenders much easier before freeing other players. However, when given the starting jersey against Italy, Anscombe, to me, looked off the pace. I sometimes have this weird fantasy where I get cornered in a dark alley and I have to talk my way out of it before they realise all I have on me is an iPod Classic and that has nothing but sentimental value in the entire works of Girls Aloud. Some nights, I find this thought so rewarding that I walk down dark alleys alone hoping to get mugged. That's how Gareth Anscombe plays. He finds the thought of being the match winner so enticing that he never stops to think how stupid the thing he's doing is. And annoyingly, he's talented enough that enough of these stupid things come off for him to never stop to worry about it. Against Italy, he spent his entire match trying flashy shit and forgot the basics quicker than I will when I can finally afford to taste the difference. He only passed 5 times and left the kicking and game management to Hadley Parkes at 12. Splitting decision making doesn't have to be a problem, but whilst I wasn't on the pitch and so obviously can't know for certain, Anscombe struck me as being unusually quiet for an international outside half on Saturday. Wales, when presented with literally anyone, Biggar will happily scream at them for a few minutes and Patchell will play them Wonderwall. Anscombe becomes remarkably quiet. With his hardback partner in the bin, Anscombe made no attempt to step up and was barely communicative. He also struggles going backwards, as he's suddenly unable to spring the same surprises when defences are on top. Of all the 10s available to Wales, Anscombe is perhaps the most likely to make something out of nothing, but he's also the least likely to make something out of rubbish. What I'm saying is, great magician, terrible Womble. There are 2 other names who are in contention that we haven't seen in the Six Nations, so I'll just quickly touch on them. One is Rhys Priestland, perhaps the most complete 10 Wales has to offer. He's superb at bringing the best out of the players around him, a knack that made him perhaps the key player during Wales' 2011 World Cup campaign. Though he's by and large sorted it out, the issue he always had in the past was his temperament. He's had more pitch-based meltdowns than an ice cream soprano. The other contender is Sam Davis, who's great at engaging a defensive line and bringing runs into the game. He kept Biggar at the Ospreys team for numerous big games, but is also known to struggle when things aren't going his way. He's up and down, but if you catch him up, he's a very useful option. Now, I'm deliberately not going to express an opinion on which the 5 I would select. Not because I think it would ruin the video or anything, but because I believe there's only one true answer to this question, and it's not one that Gatland or Howley are thinking about. I believe there's a guy already playing 10 in Wales right now who perfectly encapsulates the mystique, flair and guile that the Welsh public want. A man who can be all the things Uncle Max sang about over and over and over and over again. Or at least he could be if he grew some sideburns. A man who, in many ways, already is to Wales what the President's mistress is to France. Many people call him God, but those unfamiliar with Welsh culture may know him by a different name. Gavin Henson. So I'm sure you understand I didn't want to show any bias, any preference towards one 10 or another in that video. Thank you very much to Milksteak Connoisseur on Reddit who suggested that video. He's clearly a connoisseur of good ideas for videos, not just milk steaks. And thank you to everyone else that's made suggestions. I am planning to do one on England next, so we'll come on to that as per everyone's suggestions. And thank you also to all the many people that have subscribed since I made the last video, because it's made me feel quite overwhelmed and successful in a way that makes me almost uncomfortable. So thank you very much for that. And just before I do finish, I wanted to address one thing that's come up quite often on messages on Twitter, on YouTube comments, etc., which is I've had quite a few people ask me, why do you hate Wales so much? And I just wanted to answer that question by saying it's because I support them.